Picture this: the golden dome of the rock, bathed in the warm glow of the rising sun, its shimmering surface reflecting centuries of history, faith, and untold stories. This isn't just a city, it's a living mosaic of human devotion, ambition, and struggle. Jerusalem stands as one of the most fought-over places on earth, a sacred crossroads where empires have clashed, prophets have walked, and the echoes of ancient prayers still linger in the air. But why? What is it about this ancient city that has drawn kings, conquerors, and pilgrims for thousands of years? Why does Jerusalem hold such an unshakable grip on the hearts of billions? The answer lies in its unique place at the intersection of geography and the divine. Jerusalem isn't just a city, it's a symbol, a spiritual epicenter revered by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam alike. Its streets whisper tales of Solomon's temple, of Jesus' crucifixion, of Muhammad's miraculous night journey, but it's also a city of stark contrasts, where moments of profound unity have been overshadowed by conflict, where empires rose and fell, each leaving their mark on its sacred soil. To understand Jerusalem is to understand the very pulse of human history, the relentless pursuit of power, the depths of faith, and the unyielding desire to claim a piece of the divine. Today, we're embarking on a journey through time, unraveling the mysteries that make Jerusalem unlike any other place on earth. We'll walk through its hallowed sites, trace the footsteps of kings and prophets, and uncover the pivotal battles that shaped its destiny. From the towering walls of the old city to the hidden tunnels beneath its streets, every stone has a story to tell. By the end, you'll see Jerusalem not just as a dot on a map, but as the beating heart of civilizations, a place where heaven and earth have always seemed just a little closer. So let's step into the past and discover why this ancient city remains, even now, the center of the world's imagination. Jerusalem's power begins with the ground beneath it, a rocky, rugged landscape perched high in the Judean mountains. This wasn't just a random dot on the map. It was a masterstroke of geography, sitting at the crossroads of three continents. Trade routes from Africa, Asia, and Europe converged here, turning the city into a bustling hub where spices, silk, and ideas flowed as freely as water. Caravans from Egypt marched northward, Mesopotamian merchants brought goods from the east, and Roman roads stretched westward, all intersecting in Jerusalem's shadow. Whoever controlled this city didn't just hold land, they commanded the arteries of the ancient world's wealth and influence. But geography gave Jerusalem more than just economic clout. It offered a natural fortress. Built on steep hills with deep valleys surrounding it, the city was a nightmare for invading armies. Attackers would have to climb under a hail of arrows while defenders rained down rocks and fire from above. The Gihon Spring, hidden within the eastern slope, provided a secret water source during sieges, making Jerusalem nearly unconquerable when its walls held. Yet these same defenses also made it irresistible. Every empire, from the pharaohs of Egypt to the Caesars of Rome, saw Jerusalem as the ultimate prize, a city that could anchor their dominance over the entire region. Still, geography alone doesn't explain why Jerusalem became sacred. Plenty of strategic cities rose and fell without becoming eternal symbols. What set this place apart was how its physical and spiritual worlds collided. The same mountains that made it a fortress also made it feel closer to the heavens, a place where the divine seemed to touch the earth. The trade routes didn't just carry goods, they carried pilgrims, prophets, and the stories that would weave Jerusalem into the soul of humanity. The rocks underfoot weren't just barriers, they became altars, and that's where the real mystery begins. At the heart of Jerusalem's sacred geography lies the Temple Mount, a plateau of bedrock that has been worshipped, contested, and revered for millennia. To Jewish tradition, this is Mount Moriah, the very spot where Abraham demonstrated his unshakable faith by preparing to sacrifice his son Isaac, only to be stopped by divine intervention. Centuries later, King Solomon would choose this same hallowed ground to build the first temple, a magnificent structure designed to house the Ark of the Covenant and serve as the spiritual center of ancient Israel. The Bible describes its construction in lavish detail: cedar from Lebanon, gold from Ophir, and stone quarried in silence so even the sound of hammers wouldn't disturb prayer. For Jews, this wasn't just a building, it was the dwelling place of God's presence on earth. But history never stands still in Jerusalem. When the Babylonians destroyed Solomon's temple in 586 BC, it became a wound in the Jewish soul, a loss mourned to this day during the fast of Tisha B'Av. The Second Temple, rebuilt under Persian rule and expanded by Herod the Great, stood for centuries until Roman legions razed it in 70 CE. Yet the sanctity of the site never faded. Jewish prayers for millennia have faced this direction, and the Western Wall, a remnant of Herod's expansion, remains a place of pilgrimage and tearful prayer. The Temple Mount story took another turn in the 7th century when Islamic tradition embraced its holiness. The Quran recounts the Prophet Muhammad's miraculous night journey, where he ascended to heaven from this very rock. The Dome of the Rock, completed in 691, became one of Islam's earliest architectural masterpieces, its golden dome symbolizing the connection between earthly and divine realms. Nearby, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, mentioned in the Quran as the farthest mosque, anchored the site as Islam's third holiest sanctuary. Medieval Arab historians like al-Muqaddasi wrote of its splendor, calling it a place where the light of prophecy still lingers. Here lies the crux of Jerusalem's enduring tension, a single slab of limestone, sacred beyond measure to multiple faiths, each viewing it as exclusively theirs. Jewish texts speak of the temple's eventual rebuilding, while Islamic tradition holds that Al-Aqsa stands as an eternal sanctuary. Crusaders, Mamluks, and Ottomans each left their mark, layering politics atop piety. Even today, the slightest shift in access or archaeology here sends ripples across the world. The Temple Mount isn't just a relic of the past, it's a living testament to how deeply geography and faith can intertwine, and how fiercely humanity will fight to hold what it holds sacred. Just a short walk from the Temple Mount, through the winding alleys of Jerusalem's Old City, stands another monument to devotion: the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. For Christians, this isn't just a building, it's the very ground where faith took its most dramatic turn. Tradition holds that here, on a rocky outcrop called Golgotha, Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. The church's walls enclose what believers consider the most pivotal moments in human history, the place where death was conquered and salvation was secured. Emperor Constantine's mother, Helena, identified the site in the 4th century, and the church built over it became a magnet for pilgrims, its stones worn smooth by centuries of reverent touch. But the Holy Sepulchre's history is as fractured as it is sacred. Medieval pilgrims didn't just visit, they fought for access. Crusader knights wept at the altar while outside, armies clashed for control of the shrine. In the 12th century, tensions between Christian factions grew so violent that the Muslim ruler Saladin had to intervene, assigning keys to the church to 2 rival families just to keep the peace. That delicate system still exists today, Every morning, a Muslim family unlocks the heavy wooden doors, while inside, Greek Orthodox, Armenian, and Catholic clergy maintain an uneasy truce over shared spaces. Ladders placed on ledges centuries ago remain untouched, lest moving them spark fresh disputes. Even the church's upkeep is divided with mathematical precision. One denomination repairs this column, another tends that staircase, all under a fragile status quo that's lasted generations. This patchwork of devotion raises a profound question. How did Jerusalem become the spiritual heart of three world religions? Perhaps because it's not just about places, it's about stories. For Jews, the Temple Mount is where heaven met earth. For Muslims, it's the launchpad of a prophet's journey. For Christians, the Holy Sepulchre is where despair turned to hope. These narratives don't just coexist, they overlap, layer, and sometimes collide, each faith seeing its own reflection in the city's stones. Jerusalem doesn't offer easy answers, but it holds up a mirror to humanity's deepest longings for connection, meaning, and a glimpse of the divine. And that's why, even amid the tension, pilgrims still kneel in the same ancient dust, each finding something transcendent in this crowded, contested, sacred space. Descending from the Temple Mount, just beyond the crowded prayer plaza and through a narrow passageway, lies a towering expanse of weathered limestone, the Western Wall. This isn't merely an ancient structure. It's the last physical remnant of Judaism's Second Temple, a silent witness to 2,000 years of longing. Jewish tradition holds that the divine presence never left this wall, making it the closest point to the Holy of Holies where the Ark once rested. Every day, rain or shine, pilgrims press their hands against its crevices, tucking handwritten prayers into its cracks, as if the stones themselves could carry their whispers to heaven. The wall's massive Herodian blocks, some weighing over 500 tons, bear the marks of history, centuries of chiseled inscriptions, candle soot, and the faint imprints of countless foreheads pressed in devotion. Yet step back and the scene transforms. The Western Wall Plaza thrums with a striking contrast. Ultra-Orthodox Jews sway in prayer beside uniformed soldiers on leave, while tourists in sun hats snap photos. Just beyond, the air shifts again, spices waft from the Muslim quarter's market stalls. Armenian priests in black robes hurry past Crusader-era archways, and the clatter of coffee cups echoes from Christian guesthouses. This is Jerusalem in microcosm, sacred serenity colliding with vibrant, messy humanity. The wall's very stones seem to absorb it all, the tears of a bar mitzvah boy chanting Torah, the murmured psalms of a Holocaust survivor, the curious whispers of a backpacker touching history for the first time. But such intensity was never destined to remain peaceful. The Western Wall sits at the intersection of faith and politics, where reverence and rivalry share the same cobblestones. In 1929, disputes over prayer rights here spiraled into deadly riots between Jews and Arabs. In 1967, Israeli paratroopers fought their way to the wall during the Six-Day War, their emotional embrace of its stones broadcast worldwide. Today, archaeological tunnels beneath the wall reveal even older layers: Herodian streets, Roman rubble, Mamluk-era arches, each discovery reigniting debates over who controls the narrative and the land. The wall's quiet power lies in its duality, a place of intimate prayer that somehow stands at the center of global tensions. It reminds us that in Jerusalem, even stones carry weight far beyond their size because they're never just stones. They're symbols, battle lines, and fragments of a past that refuses to stay buried. The ancient texts of three faiths echo with Jerusalem's name, each etching its sacredness into the collective consciousness of billions. In the Hebrew Bible, the city emerges as both a physical place and a divine promise. King David's conquest of Jerusalem, described in 2 Samuel as the capture of Zion, transformed it from a Jebusite stronghold into the spiritual capital of Israel. Psalms call it the city of our God, where the Lord dwells eternally. Prophets like Isaiah envisioned a future where nations would stream to Jerusalem, drawn by its light, a vision that fueled Jewish longing through exile and diaspora. But it's the book of Deuteronomy that binds the people to the land with an unbreakable thread. Look to the east and west, north and south, for all the land you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. These words didn't just inspire devotion, they became a territorial covenant, a sacred deed written in Scripture. The New Testament shifts the lens but deepens the city's mystique. Jerusalem is where Jesus wept over its future destruction, where he overturned the money changers' tables in the temple courts, and where his crucifixion and resurrection unfolded. The book of Revelation takes the imagery further, depicting a heavenly Jerusalem descending like a bride adorned for her husband, a symbol of eternal peace replacing the earthly city's strife. For early Christians, these narratives turned Jerusalem into both a literal destination for pilgrimage and a metaphor for salvation. When Constantine's mother Helena identified the sites of Jesus' passion, she didn't just map geography. She anchored Christian identity to real stones, making the city's soil inseparable from the faith's foundation. Then comes the Quran's luminous turn. In Surah al-Isra, the text recounts Muhammad's night journey from Mecca to the farthest mosque, identified by tradition as Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. The Dome of the Rock's inscriptions proclaim Muhammad as God's messenger and Jesus as his prophet, weaving Jerusalem into Islam's theological tapestry. For Muslims, the city became the first Qibla, the direction of prayer before Mecca, and its liberation by Saladin in the 12th century was celebrated as a divine triumph. The Quranic promise that the land has been ennobled by God's messengers turned Jerusalem into a trust to be guarded, a spiritual keystone in Islam's arch. These texts didn't just describe a city, they ignited a celestial real estate battle. When Crusaders stormed Jerusalem in 1099, they carried Bibles alongside swords, convinced they were reclaiming Christ's inheritance. Jewish prayers for next year in Jerusalem during Passover kept the dream of return alive through centuries of displacement. Ottoman sultans, quoting Quranic verses, styled themselves as protectors of Islam's holy sites. Scripture gave each faith not just a map to Jerusalem's streets, but a deed to its soul, and where divine promises clash, human conflict often follows. The ink on these ancient pages dried long ago, but their words still shape the stones beneath pilgrims' feet, proving that in Jerusalem, faith is never just about belief, it's about belonging. Before Jerusalem became a city of gold and temples, it was a rugged hilltop fortress known as Jebus, home to the Canaanite Jebusites, who thought their walls were impregnable. Then came David, the shepherd-turned-king, whose ascent to power would forever alter the city's destiny. Fresh from uniting Israel's fractious tribes, David needed a capital that belonged to no single tribe but could symbolize a new national identity. Jebus, perched on the border between Judah and Benjamin, was perfect, neutral, defensible, and steeped in mystique. The biblical account in 2 Samuel tells how David's men infiltrated the city through its water shaft, a detail that modern archaeology may have corroborated. Excavations at the Gihon Spring revealed a vertical tunnel that matches the description, a silent witness to one of history's most audacious coups. David's genius wasn't just military, it was spiritual. By bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, he fused political power with divine sanction. The Ark, said to hold the tablets of the Ten Commandments, transformed the city into more than a seat of government. It became Yahweh's dwelling place. Psalms from this era depict Jerusalem as the joy of all the earth, a city where heaven and earth met. Recent discoveries in the city of David area, including a 10th century BC palace and fortifications, hint at the scale of David's ambition. A fragment bearing the phrase House of David, found at Tel Dan in northern Israel, offers rare extra-biblical proof of his dynasty's existence, silencing skeptics who once dismissed him as mere legend. But it was David's son Solomon who would elevate Jerusalem to architectural splendor. Inheriting a stable kingdom, Solomon leveraged trade alliances with Phoenicia and Egypt to fund his grandest project, the First Temple. First Kings describes 7 years of construction, with cedar imported from Lebanon and craftsmen summoned from Tyre. The temple wasn't just lavish, it was a microcosm of creation itself, its inner sanctuary representing the Garden of Eden, its pillars named Jachin and bows symbolizing cosmic stability. For the Israelites, this was the axis mundi, the center of the world. Yet Solomon's glory came at a cost. Heavy taxes and forced labor bred resentment, sowing seeds for the kingdom's eventual division. Jerusalem's golden age would be breathtaking but brief, a reminder that even the holiest of cities cannot escape the tides of human ambition. Solomon's temple rose from the bedrock of Mount Moriah like a vision of heaven brought to earth, a structure so magnificent, even the Queen of Sheba was said to have gasped at its splendor. The biblical account in 1 Kings paints a picture of almost unimaginable opulence. Walls lined with cedar from Lebanon, floors overlaid with pure gold, and twin bronze pillars standing sentinel at the entrance, their capitals adorned with pomegranates and lilies. Craftsmen from Phoenicia carved cherubim with outstretched wings to overshadow the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies, while priests in linen robes moved through halls fragrant with incense. This wasn't just a building, it was a theological masterpiece designed to mirror the cosmos itself. The temple's 3-tiered structure echoed the ancient Near Eastern concept of a sacred mountain linking Earth to the divine realm, a place where humanity could reach toward the infinite. But the temple's grandeur wasn't merely for show. Every detail carried symbolic weight. The bronze sea, a massive basin resting on 12 oxen statues, represented the primordial waters of creation. The menorah's 7 branches evoked the tree of life. Even the silence imposed on stonecutters who shaped blocks miles away to avoid the noise of hammers reflected reverence for sacred space. For nearly 4 centuries, this sanctuary stood as the heartbeat of Jewish life, where pilgrims flocked for festivals like Passover, their songs of ascent echoing through its courts. Yet beneath the gold and marble lay a tension. The same temple meant to unify Israel became a lightning rod for power struggles. Prophets like Jeremiah warned that ritual alone couldn't substitute for justice, his words foreshadowing the cataclysm to come. That reckoning arrived in 586 BC, when Babylonian forces under Nebuchadnezzar breached Jerusalem's walls. The temple, stripped of its treasures, was reduced to smoldering rubble. The Book of Lamentations captures the horror. Zion's sacred vessels are poured out into the hands of strangers. Her priests groan as they search for scraps of food. The elite of Judah were marched into exile, their harps hanging silent on willow branches by the rivers of Babylon. But in that moment of desolation, something remarkable took root. Far from home, Jewish scribes began compiling their history, laws, and prayers texts that would become the Hebrew Bible. The temple's physical destruction couldn't erase its spiritual blueprint. Instead, it became portable, carried in memory and scripture. The trauma of exile forged a new kind of resilience. Synagogues emerged as places of study and prayer, adapting worship without sacrifice. Prophets like Ezekiel envisioned a future temple descending from heaven, while Psalms vowed, "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither." When Persian ruler Cyrus the Great permitted the Jews to return decades later, their first act was rebuilding the temple, a smaller, humbler version, but one that reignited the flame of hope. This unbroken thread of longing, woven through centuries of diaspora, reveals Jerusalem's true power. It's not just a city of stone, but an idea that refuses to fade. Even today, when Jewish weddings conclude with the shattering of a glass, it's a reminder joy remains incomplete as long as Zion lies in ruins. The temple may be gone, but its legacy pulses through every prayer, every turned page of Torah, every whispered dream of return. Jerusalem, in the end, is less about what was lost than what endures. The fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians in 586 BC wasn't just a military defeat, it was a spiritual earthquake that reshaped Jewish identity forever. Imagine the scene: the temple, that dazzling house of gold and cedar where God's presence had dwelled, now lay in smoldering ruins. The city walls, once thought impregnable, were reduced to rubble. And the surviving elite of Judah, priests, artisans, royal officials, were marched 800 miles east to Babylon in chains. The Book of Psalms captures the raw grief of that moment. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? This wasn't just nostalgia. It was the agony of a people severed from their sacred center, forced to reconcile their faith with the unthinkable that Yahweh had allowed his own dwelling place to be destroyed. Yet in that crucible of exile, something extraordinary happened. Far from home, the Jewish community didn't dissolve, it adapted. Without the temple, they gathered in homes to study the laws of Moses, laying the groundwork for what would become synagogue worship. Scribes meticulously compiled their history and prophecies, forging the texts that would form the Hebrew Bible. The prophet Ezekiel, living by the Kebar River in Babylon, received visions of a future Jerusalem restored, not just as a city, but as a radiant symbol of divine justice. And the Psalms composed during this period, like Psalm 137 with its haunting vow, "If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill," transformed longing into liturgy. Jerusalem was no longer just a place, it became an idea, a promise carried in the hearts of the displaced. The turning point came in 538 BCE, when Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon and issued an edict that would change history. The Cyrus cylinder, a clay artifact discovered in 1879, records his policy of allowing displaced peoples to return home, a radical act of tolerance in the ancient world. For the Jews, this meant permission to rebuild their temple. The Book of Ezra describes how the first wave of returnees, led by Zerubbabel, arrived to a Jerusalem so broken, older mourners wept at the foundation-laying ceremony, remembering Solomon's grandeur. The new temple, completed in 515 BCE, was a shadow of its predecessor. No gold-covered walls, no legendary Ark of the Covenant, but its significance was immeasurable. It stood as proof that the bond between the Jewish people and Jerusalem could survive even annihilation. But the challenges weren't over. Over the next 2 centuries, Jerusalem found itself caught in the crosscurrents of empires. When Alexander the Great swept through the Near East in the 4th century BCE, his successors, the Ptolemies of Egypt and Seleucids of Syria, vied for control of this strategic hilltop. The Hellenistic era brought new tensions. Greek gymnasiums sprang up near the Temple Mount, and Jewish elites debated how much to assimilate. Then came the spark that would ignite a revolution. In 167 BC, the Seleucid king Antiochus Roman IV desecrated the temple, erecting an altar to Zeus and sacrificing pigs, an abomination to Jewish law. The outrage fueled the Maccabean Revolt, a guerrilla war that reclaimed Jerusalem and rededicated the temple, an event commemorated to this day as Hanukkah. The message was clear. Jerusalem wasn't just a city to be rebuilt. It was a covenant to be defended, no matter the cost, and that defiance would echo through the centuries, proving that even when empires rise and fall, some bonds refuse to break. The winds of change blew through Jerusalem in the wake of Alexander the Great's conquests, bringing with them the glittering allure of Greek culture. By the 2nd century BCE, the city stood at a crossroads, caught between the traditions of its ancestors and the seductive pull of Hellenism. Greek gymnasiums rose near the Temple Mount, where young Jewish men competed naked in athletic games, their uncircumcised bodies a stark rejection of covenant identity. The Seleucid rulers, heirs to Alexander's fractured empire, saw Jerusalem as just another province to be molded in their image. But for the priests and scholars who guarded the Torah's laws, this was more than cultural evolution. It was an existential threat. The clash wasn't merely about language or fashion. It was a battle for the soul of a people. Antiochus Roman IV Epiphanes, the Seleucid king whose name would live in infamy, escalated tensions to a breaking point. In 167 BCE, he issued decrees that struck at the heart of Jewish life. Sabbath observance and circumcision became capital crimes. The temple itself was defiled, an altar to Zeus erected over the Holy of Holies. Swine's blood splashed across its sacred vessels. Ancient historian Josephus records how scrolls of Torah were burned publicly, their ashes mixed with wine to force feed the faithful. For Antiochus, this was about control. For the Jewish people, it was nothing short of sacrilege. But in the village of Modian, an elderly priest named Mattathias ignited the spark of rebellion. When a Hellenized Jew stepped forward to offer a pagan sacrifice, Mattathias drew his sword and struck him down, then turned to the crowd with a cry that would echo through history: "Let everyone who is zealous for the Torah follow me." What followed was one of antiquity's most improbable uprisings. Mattathias's sons, led by Judah Maccabee, the Hammer, transformed a ragtag band of farmers into a guerrilla force that outmaneuvered the Seleucid war machine. They exploited the rugged Judean terrain, launching hit-and-run attacks against vastly superior forces. The books of Maccabees describe how Judah's fighters, though few in number and weak in power, routed armies through sheer audacity and intimate knowledge of the land. In 164 BC, they recaptured Jerusalem and found the temple in ruins, its menorah extinguished, its walls defaced with pagan symbols. The rededication ceremony became legend, a single cruse of ritually pure oil, enough for one day, miraculously burned for 8. This miracle, commemorated as Hanukkah, wasn't just about light overcoming darkness. It was a testament to resilience in the face of assimilation. Yet the Maccabees' victory carried contradictions. The dynasty they founded, the Hasmoneans, soon adopted the trappings of the Hellenistic rulers they'd overthrown. Their kings took Greek names, minted coins with pagan imagery, and plunged into the very power struggles they'd once condemned. By the 1st century BCE, Jerusalem found itself caught in a new web of intrigue as Roman General Pompey marched into the city, drawn by a Hasmonean civil war. The era of Jewish independence had lasted barely a century before the iron tread of Rome's legions echoed through the streets. Pompey's audacious breach of the temple's inner sanctuary, where only the high priest was permitted, sent shockwaves through the Jewish world. The Romans, masters of realpolitik, cared little for local taboos. Jerusalem was now a prize in their relentless expansion. This collision of cultures set the stage for Jerusalem's most turbulent chapter yet. The Hasmoneans had preserved Jewish identity against Hellenistic absorption, only to see their successors Herod and later Roman procurators turn the city into a theater of imperial ambition. The Maccabees' revolt proved that faith could move mountains, but it also revealed a painful truth. In Jerusalem, liberation often sowed the seeds of new domination. The menorah's light still burned, but its glow now fell on a city where politics and piety walked an ever-narrowing tightrope. And as Rome's shadow lengthened over the Temple Mount, few could have imagined how profoundly this next occupation would shape Jerusalem's destiny and the birth of a faith that would one day span the globe. Jerusalem under Roman rule was a city of breathtaking contrasts where staggering architectural ambition collided with the raw exercise of imperial power. Enter Herod the Great, Rome's client king, whose reign transformed the city's skyline while masking a reign of paranoia and brutality. A master builder with a taste for grandeur, Herod launched the most ambitious expansion of the Temple Mount in history. Workers toiled for decades, quarrying massive limestone blocks, some weighing over 600 tons, and hoisting them into place to create a platform nearly double the size of the original. The temple itself, sheathed in gold plating, reflected sunlight so intensely that ancient sources claim pilgrims had to avert their eyes when approaching from the Mount of Olives. Roman historian Josephus, no stranger to hyperbole, called it a structure more noteworthy than any other under the sun, yet Herod's Jerusalem was a gilded cage. Beneath the marble courtyards and colonnaded streets, tensions simmered. The king, half Jewish by birth but thoroughly Roman in allegiance, walked a precarious line, expanding the temple to win Jewish loyalty while erecting theaters and aqueducts to please his Roman patrons. His personal insecurities ran deep. He executed his own sons and beloved wife on suspicion of treason, a cruelty so notorious that Emperor Augustus quipped it was better to be Herod's pig than his son. When Herod died in 4 BC, his kingdom fractured and Rome tightened its grip. Procurators like Pontius Pilate, infamous for his role in Jesus' trial, governed with a mix of indifference and heavy-handedness, imposing taxes and displaying imperial insignia that stoked Jewish resentment. The powder keg ignited in 66 CE, a Roman raid on the temple treasury, coupled with a series of provocations, sparked the Great Jewish Revolt. Rebel factions seized Jerusalem, minting coins inscribed "Freedom of Zion," as Roman legions marched south under General Vespasian. By the time his son Titus besieged the city in 70 CE, Jerusalem was already weakened by infighting among rebel groups. The horror of that summer was etched indelibly by Josephus, an eyewitness who described streets clogged with corpses, mothers driven to cannibalism by starvation, and the temple's sacrificial altar running with blood. When Roman battering rams finally breached the walls, Titus ordered the temple burned, its melting gold seeping between the stones, which legionaries pried apart to recover the precious metal. The destruction was so total that the traditional Jewish fast of Tisha B'Av still mourns the catastrophe 2,000 years later, but Jerusalem's story didn't end in ashes. In a twist of irony, the city's spiritual significance only deepened with its physical ruin. Early Christians who had fled before the siege reinterpreted the temple's fall as divine judgment, shifting their focus to the heavenly Jerusalem foretold in Revelation. Meanwhile, Jewish sages at Yavne reinvented Judaism for a post-temple world, replacing sacrifice with prayer and study. And centuries later, when Emperor Constantine embraced Christianity, his mother Helena journeyed to Jerusalem, identifying sites like Golgotha and the Holy Sepulchre, laying the groundwork for a new sacred geography. The rubble of Herod's temple became a quarry for churches, then mosques, each faith building its own layer of meaning atop the stones. Jerusalem, it seemed, could never be merely a city of the past. It was always being reborn, its wounds giving way to new visions of the divine. The dust of Roman Jerusalem had barely settled when a seismic shift reshaped the city once more, this time under the banner of Christianity. Emperor Constantine's conversion in the early 4th century didn't just alter the fate of an empire, it reignited Jerusalem's sacred flame with startling intensity. After centuries of Roman neglect, Hadrian had even renamed the city Aelia Capitolina and built a temple to Jupiter over Golgotha. Constantine's mother, Helena, arrived like a divine archaeologist. Tradition holds that she unearthed the true cross near the site of Jesus' crucifixion, a discovery that electrified the Christian world. Suddenly, Jerusalem wasn't just a backdrop to the Gospels, it was a living map of salvation. Constantine poured imperial resources into monumental projects, transforming the city into a pilgrimage magnet. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, completed in 335, rose over the very spots where Jesus was crucified and resurrected, its rotunda designed to evoke the resurrection's cosmic significance. Pilgrims from as far as Gaul and Ethiopia flocked to walk its marble floors, their footsteps tracing the path of redemption itself. But Constantine's vision extended beyond single sites. He ordered the construction of a network of churches that turned Jerusalem into a three-dimensional Bible. The Church of the Nativity in nearby Bethlehem marked Jesus' birthplace, while the Iona Basilica on the Mount of Olives commemorated his ascension. Pilgrims like the noblewoman Egeria, whose travel diary survives from the late 4th century, describe processions winding through the city's streets, worshippers chanting psalms at the Pool of Siloam, climbing the Mount of Olives with palm branches, and weeping at the ruins of the temple, now seen as a symbol of Judaism's supersession. Jerusalem's topography became a theological canvas, every hill and valley reinterpreted through Christian eyes. Even the city's name shed its Roman past, reclaimed as Jerusalem, the Greek form echoing its holy calling. This Christian golden age, however, carried contradictions. The same empire that built churches also marginalized Jerusalem's Jewish community, banning them from entering the city except on Tisha B'Av to mourn the temple's destruction. Byzantine rulers like Justinian later expanded Jerusalem's grandeur. His massive knee church, dedicated in 543, boasted marble columns imported from Carthage, but their piety often coexisted with political calculation. Jerusalem was both a spiritual beacon and a chess piece in Rome's rivalry with Persia. That tension reached a breaking point in 614, when Persian forces allied with Jewish rebels stormed the city, slaughtering Christians and allegedly carrying off the true cross as war booty. Though Emperor Heraclius recovered the relic in 628, the victory was short-lived. A new power was rising in the Arabian deserts, one that would eclipse Byzantium's dreams and redefine Jerusalem's destiny yet again. The Islamic conquest of 638 unfolded with startling swiftness. Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab entered Jerusalem not as a destroyer, but as a protector of its sacred legacy. According to Muslim chroniclers, he refused to pray inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, fearing his followers would later claim it as a mosque. Instead, he cleared the Temple Mount's rubble, where the Romans had built a garbage dump to humiliate Jewish longing, and erected a simple wooden mosque. This act was more than symbolic. It acknowledged Jerusalem's deep connection to Abrahamic faiths while asserting Islam's place in that lineage. Within decades, the Umayyad dynasty would transform the skyline with the Dome of the Rock, its golden dome a deliberate counterpoint to Christianity's grand churches. Arabic inscriptions inside challenged Christian theology while honoring Jesus and Moses as prophets. Jerusalem, once the heart of Christendom, had become a shared and contested sanctuary where the call to prayer now mingled with church bells, each echoing over stones heavy with millennia of devotion. The city's genius lay in its ability to absorb these layers without surrendering its essence. proving once more that no single empire could ever claim it entirely. The story of Jerusalem's Islamic heritage begins with a moment so extraordinary it transcends time and space, the night journey of the Prophet Muhammad. According to the Quran's Surah al-Isra, one night in the early 7th century, Muhammad was transported from Mecca to the farthest mosque, believed by tradition to be Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. There he ascended through the heavens, meeting prophets like Moses and Jesus before standing in the divine presence. This miraculous event, known as Isra and Miraj, didn't just link Islam to Jerusalem's sacred landscape, it wove the city into the very fabric of Muslim identity. For early Muslims, the journey affirmed Jerusalem as the first Qibla, the direction of prayer before Mecca, and a spiritual bridge between earthly and celestial realms. Medieval scholars like Ibn Kathir described the Dome of the Rock's foundation stone as the literal footprint of Muhammad's ascent, a place where the veil between worlds grew thin. When the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik commissioned the Dome of the Rock in 691, he wasn't just building a shrine, he was making a theological statement. Perched atop the Temple Mount, its golden dome shimmered like a beacon, visible from every corner of the city. The octagonal design, adorned with intricate mosaics and calligraphy, borrowed from Byzantine churches but subverted their symbolism. Arabic inscriptions inside challenged Christian beliefs about Jesus' divinity while honoring him as a prophet, a deliberate assertion of Islam's place in the Abrahamic lineage. The dome's very location atop Judaism's holiest site signaled a new era. Jerusalem was now a shared sanctuary, yet undeniably Islamic. Travelers like the geographer al-Muqaddasi marveled at its splendor, writing that its beauty made the hearts of men soar. Even the Crusaders, when they arrived centuries later, mistook it for Solomon's temple, so awe-inspiring was its presence. But Jerusalem's Islamic Golden Age faced a brutal interruption in 1099, when Crusader armies breached the city's walls after a grueling siege. What followed was a massacre so horrific, chroniclers on both sides recoiled at the carnage. Muslim and Jewish residents were slaughtered in the streets, their blood, as one Crusader account coldly noted, reaching the horses' knees. The Dome of the Rock was converted into a church, its golden cross a stark symbol of conquest. For nearly a century, Jerusalem became the capital of a fragile Crusader kingdom, its holy sites reshaped to fit a Latin Christian narrative. Yet even in exile, Muslim reverence for the city never faded. Poets like Ibn al-Arabi composed elegies for its loss, while the Kurdish general Saladin, embodying the ideal of jihad, vowed to reclaim it. When his forces finally triumphed in 1187, he entered the city not as a vengeful conqueror, but as a restorer, reconsecrating the Dome of the Rock and washing its floors with rosewater. The cycle of reverence and conflict had turned once more, proving that Jerusalem's holiness could be denied by no one, but claimed by none forever. The thunder of Crusader siege engines shook Jerusalem's walls in the summer of 1099, marking the brutal climax of a campaign fueled by equal parts piety and bloodlust. For 3 years, waves of European knights, peasants, and clergy had marched east, answering Pope Urban II's call to liberate the Holy City from Muslim rule. Their journey was etched with hardship, starvation, desertions, and battles against Byzantine allies and Turkish foes alike. But nothing compared to the frenzy that gripped them as they finally breached Jerusalem's defenses on July 15th. What followed wasn't just a battle, it was a slaughter so horrific that even Crusader chroniclers struggled to sanitize it. Raymond of Aguilar's, an eyewitness, wrote of knights wading through streets, ankle-deep in blood, while Jewish families burned alive in their synagogue refuge. The Dome of the Rock, which the Crusaders mistook for Solomon's temple, ran red as attackers hunted down Muslims who had sought sanctuary there. In one grisly account, a commander rode his horse into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, its hooves slipping on a floor slick with the dead. The victors wasted no time reshaping the city in their image. Godfrey of Bouillon, crowned as Jerusalem's first Christian ruler, though he refused the title of king, calling himself instead defender of the Holy Sepulchre, ordered the mass burial of corpses to cleanse the stench of death. The Dome of the Rock became Templum Domini, the Al-Aqsa Mosque transformed into a royal palace, and churches rose over demolished mosques. Pilgrims from Europe flooded in, their travelogues painting Jerusalem as a new Jerusalem, purified by Frankish hands. Yet beneath the surface, the Crusader kingdom was always fragile. Outnumbered and surrounded by hostile neighbors, its rulers relied on a patchwork of alliances and sheer brutality to survive. When Queen Melisende commissioned the stunning Psalter that bears her name, its golden pages depicted Crusader kings alongside biblical scenes, a desperate attempt to weave their rule into sacred history. But the tide began to turn with the rise of a Kurdish general whose name would echo through the ages, Saladin. Unlike the Crusaders, who saw Jerusalem as a trophy to be seized, Saladin viewed its liberation as a sacred duty. His unification of Muslim forces under the banner of jihad turned the tide. After crushing the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin in 1187, where he captured the relic of the true cross, Saladin laid siege to Jerusalem. Yet his triumph would be marked not by vengeance but by restraint. When the city surrendered, he forbade the massacre that had stained the Crusaders' conquest, allowing Christian residents to leave safely upon payment of a ransom. His troops washed the Dome of the Rock's floors with rosewater, purifying what they saw as a space desecrated. Even his adversaries acknowledged his magnanimity. The Christian chronicler Ern Owl noted how Saladin provided escorts for vulnerable pilgrims to ensure their safe passage home. Saladin's reconquest left a paradoxical legacy. Though he restored Jerusalem to Muslim hands, he also ensured its status as a shared spiritual home. His donation of properties to Christian and Jewish communities set a precedent for coexistence that would flicker through centuries of conflict. The Third Crusade, led by Richard the Lionheart, failed to retake the city but secured access for Christian pilgrims, a compromise that acknowledged Jerusalem's indivisible sanctity. Today, Saladin's sword is a symbol of resistance across the Muslim world, while in the West, he's remembered as the chivalrous foe who haunted Crusader nightmares. His victory proved that Jerusalem's soul could never be owned by any one faith, only borrowed for a time. The Crusades had sought to divide the city's holiness along religious lines, but in the end, they only deepened its paradox, a place where war and reverence walk hand in hand, where every stone remembers both the best and worst of what humanity can be. Saladin's entry into Jerusalem in 1187 marked a turning point not just in the city's history, but in the very idea of conquest itself. Unlike the blood-soaked Crusader takeover 88 years earlier, his victory was orchestrated with calculated restraint. When the city's defenders surrendered, he forbade the looting and slaughter that had characterized previous sieges, even paying from his own coffers to ransom impoverished Christians who couldn't afford the agreed-upon fee for safe passage. His troops removed crosses from the Dome of the Rock with deliberate care rather than defacing them, and Orthodox Christian clergy were invited to resume services at the Holy Sepulchre, a stark contrast to the Latin Church's earlier suppression of rival Christian sects. This wasn't mere politics, it reflected Saladin's nuanced understanding of Jerusalem as a tapestry of faiths. The city flourished under his Ayyubid dynasty as a crossroads of intellectual and spiritual exchange. Arabic chronicles describe markets where Jewish silk merchants from Italy haggled alongside Syrian glassblowers, while Sufi mystics lectured in madrasas built near Crusader-era churches. Saladin's court physician Maimonides, a Jewish scholar who had fled persecution in Spain, penned his groundbreaking medical texts in Arabic, bridging Greek and Islamic knowledge. Even the architecture told a story of synthesis. Ayyubid builders repurposed Crusader stonework into elegant Islamic arches, and the city's new hospitals treated patients regardless of religion. Jerusalem became a living argument that coexistence wasn't just possible but prosperous. Yet this golden age was fragile. When the Ayyubid line faded, power passed to the Mamluks, former slave soldiers who ruled from Cairo starting in 1250. Their approach to Jerusalem was more pragmatic than pious. Though they expanded Islamic institutions like the towering Madrasa al-Ashrafiyya near the Temple Mount, they treated the city as a backwater, diverting resources to fortify coastal cities against lingering Crusader threats. Paradoxically, this neglect preserved Jerusalem's eclectic character. Without heavy-handed oversight, Jewish Kabbalists scribbled mystical treatises in the shadow of the Western Wall. Armenian monks copied illuminated gospels in their secluded quarter, and Bedouin traders maintained ancient pilgrimage routes to Bethlehem. The Ottoman conquest in 1517 brought yet another layer to the palimpsest. Sultan Selim I, fresh from defeating the Mamluks, prayed at Al-Aqsa Mosque in a symbolic coronation as protector of Islam's holy cities. But his successor Suleiman the Magnificent left the most visible mark: the current walls encircling the old city, their golden limestone cut to harmonize with the terrain. Ottoman archives reveal meticulous attention to interfaith balance. Jewish access to the Western Wall was codified in firmans, while Christian denominations jostled for influence under the watchful eye of imperial administrators. For 3 centuries, Jerusalem existed in a tense equilibrium, its spiritual magnetism tempered by Ottoman bureaucracy. The stones themselves seemed to whisper that no single empire could ever truly own this city, only steward it briefly before adding another thread to its ever-unfolding story. The Mamluks ruled Jerusalem with an iron grip wrapped in velvet. Warrior sultans who valued the city more for its symbolism than its strategic worth. Though their capital remained in Cairo, they left an indelible mark on Jerusalem's skyline. Walk through the old city today, and you'll still trace their legacy in the geometric precision of madrasas like Al-Ashrafiyya, its striped stone arches framing courtyards where scholars once debated Islamic law. They transformed the Temple Mount's periphery into an open-air university, with schools like the Tankaziyya boasting intricate stucco work and libraries stocked with Qurans copied in gold ink. Yet for all their architectural patronage, the Mamluks treated Jerusalem as a backwater. Taxes flowed east to fund coastal fortresses against lingering Crusader threats, while the city's streets grew quieter, its population dwindling to a fraction of its medieval heyday. Paradoxically, this neglect fostered an unexpected harmony. With fewer imperial eyes watching, Jerusalem's religious communities developed delicate systems of coexistence. Jewish pilgrims from Spain and North Africa scribbled prayers on scraps of paper to tuck into the Western Wall's crevices, while Armenian monks in their secluded quarter illuminated Bibles with lapis lazuli pigments traded from Afghanistan. Muslim chroniclers like Mujir al-Din documented shared festivals where Christians lit olive oil lamps alongside Muslim neighbors during Ramadan. The Mamluks, for all their austerity, allowed this tapestry to endure so long as no thread threatened to unravel the whole. Then came the Ottomans in 1517, their cannons heralding a new chapter. Sultan Selim I, fresh from crushing the Mamluks at the Battle of Marj Dabik, prayed at Al-Aqsa Mosque in a symbolic coronation as Islam's new protector. But it was his son, Suleiman the Magnificent, who reshaped Jerusalem's physical identity. Between 1535 and 1541, Suleiman's engineers encircled the old city with the golden limestone walls we know today, their ramparts following the natural contours of the valleys, their 7 gates, including the sealed Golden Gate where Jewish tradition says the Messiah will enter, designed as both fortification and propaganda. Ottoman archives reveal meticulous attention to detail. Workmen hauled stones from Herod's quarries, just as their ancient predecessors had, while calligraphers carved Arabic inscriptions above each gate proclaiming Suleiman's grandeur. Beneath those walls, the Ottomans orchestrated a delicate dance between faiths. Firman's imperial decrees guaranteed Jewish access to the Western Wall, though forbade them from paving the alleyway or blowing shofars too loudly. Christian denominations jostled for influence, with French kings lobbying for Catholic control of the Holy Sepulchre, while Russian Orthodox clergy smuggled in silver candlesticks under the noses of Ottoman guards. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre's infamous, immovable ladder, placed beneath a window by an Armenian monk in the 18th century and left there due to status quo agreements, became a symbol of this frozen equilibrium. Yet beyond the old city, change stirred. European consuls established footholds in the 19th century, their neoclassical consulates and hospitals introducing foreign aesthetics to Jerusalem's hills. Prussian King Frederick William IV sent Protestant missionaries, while French nuns opened schools teaching Arabic alongside French. The Ottomans, sensing their grip weakening, permitted new synagogues like the Ramban in the Jewish quarter, but also taxed pilgrims mercilessly. By the 1860s, steamships disgorged waves of Victorian tourists clutching Baedeker guides, their crinolines rustling past Bedouin sheepherders in the Kidron Valley. Jerusalem was no longer just a sacred relic. It had become a chessboard where empires played with spiritual stakes. The quiet centuries were ending, and the city braced itself for the storm to come. By the mid-19th century, Jerusalem had become a prize in a new kind of holy war, not fought with swords, but with diplomacy, archaeology, and the soft power of European empires. As the Ottoman Empire weakened, Britain, France, Prussia, and Russia jockeyed for influence, each seeing the city as a strategic and spiritual lever. Consulates sprouted like chess pieces around the old city walls, their flags fluttering over hospitals, schools, and guest houses designed to woo the local population. The French rebuilt the crumbling Church of the Holy Sepulchre, while the Russians erected the towering Alexander Nevsky Cathedral. Its onion domes a deliberate challenge to the Islamic skyline. Even the Americans arrived, with Protestant missionaries distributing Bibles translated into Arabic, their efforts documented in letters home describing Jerusalem as a vineyard ripe for harvest. This imperial scramble revived ancient pilgrimage routes with modern twists. Steamships disgorged waves of Victorian tourists clutching Baedeker guides, their itineraries meticulously planned to follow the footsteps of Christ. Mark Twain, visiting in 1867, quipped that the city was a pauper village overburdened with sanctity. Yet even his skepticism couldn't mask the growing European obsession with owning its narrative. Beneath the piety, though, lay a quieter revolution, the birth of biblical archaeology. British officer Charles Warren mapped hidden tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, while French scholar Louis Félicien de Saulcy shipped sarcophagi to the Louvre, convinced he'd found the tombs of Judean kings. Every shovel of earth turned up artifacts that empires used to bolster their claims, turning archaeology into a proxy battle for legitimacy. Meanwhile, the city's long-dormant nationalist currents began to stir. Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, fleeing pogroms, arrived with dreams of agricultural collectives, a movement called Zionism that sought to transform biblical longing into political reality. Theodore Herzl, witnessing the anti-Semitic fervor of the Dreyfus Affair in France, envisioned a Jewish state with Jerusalem as its heart. At the same time, Arab intellectuals in nearby cities like Beirut and Damascus began framing their identity in opposition to Ottoman and European encroachment. Jerusalem's muftis and mayors, once content with Ottoman rule, now hosted secret meetings about self-determination. The city's cobblestones echoed with competing visions. Was it the capital of a future Jewish homeland, the center of an Arab Renaissance, or a shared spiritual inheritance? When British General Edmund Allenby marched into Jerusalem in December 1917, dismounting his horse in respect for the Holy City, he promised a new era of justice and equality. The League of Nations granted Britain the mandate for Palestine, tasking it with preparing the region for independence, but London's contradictory promises, supporting a Jewish national home in the Balfour Declaration while assuring Arab leaders of self-rule, sowed seeds of conflict. Jewish and Arab neighborhoods expanded in uneasy parallel, their rival schools teaching divergent histories. The Western Wall became a flashpoint, with disputes over prayer screens escalating into deadly riots in 1929. British administrators, caught between competing nationalisms, imposed curfews and commissions, their reports piling up like dry kindling. Jerusalem, once a city of sacred compromise, was becoming a tinderbox of modern political dreams, each one convinced its vision was the only one that could redeem these ancient stones. The British march into Jerusalem in December 1917 was supposed to usher in an era of stability, but instead, it became the catalyst for a modern struggle over the city's soul. General Allenby's symbolic dismount entering the old city on foot to show respect couldn't mask the contradictions of British rule. Their mandate, granted by the League of Nations, came with impossible promises: support for a Jewish national home under the Balfour Declaration, while simultaneously assuring Arab leaders of eventual self-governance. These clashing pledges turned Jerusalem into a pressure cooker, where every policy decision seemed to fan the flames of division. Take the Western Wall, where Jewish worshippers' attempts to bring benches or screens for prayer sparked violent clashes in 1929. British reports framed it as a dispute over religious practices, but beneath the surface it was about control. Who had the right to define Jerusalem's sacred spaces, and by extension, its future? As Jewish immigration surged in the 1930s, driven by persecution in Europe and Zionist idealism, Arab resentment hardened into organized resistance. The Arab Revolt of 1936 saw strikes and attacks targeting both British forces and Jewish communities, while Jewish paramilitary groups like the Haganah mobilized in response. Jerusalem's streets became battlegrounds, its ancient stones echoing with gunfire instead of prayers. The British response, issuing the White Paper of 1939 to limit Jewish immigration, only deepened mistrust on all sides. Holocaust survivors desperate for refuge found doors slammed shut, while Arab leaders saw the policy as too little, too late. By the end of World War II, British authority in Jerusalem was unraveling, their barracks surrounded by a tangle of competing flags and grievances. The UN's partition plan of 1947 proposed splitting Palestine into Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem as an international zone, a compromise satisfying no one. When British forces withdrew in May 1948, war erupted instantly. Jewish forces declared the State of Israel, and Arab armies from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq invaded. Jerusalem, caught in the crossfire, endured some of the fiercest fighting. The Jewish quarter of the Old City fell to Jordan's Arab Legion after brutal street-by-street combat, its synagogues dynamited in a deliberate erasure of history. Across the armistice line, West Jerusalem became Israel's capital, while East Jerusalem, including the Old City and its holy sites, was annexed by Jordan. For 19 years, concrete walls and barbed wire sliced through neighborhoods, dividing families, cutting off access to holy sites, and turning Jerusalem into a symbol of Cold War-era stalemate. Then came June 1967, the Six-Day War, a conflict that redrew the map in just 6 dizzying days. Israeli paratroopers stormed East Jerusalem, their iconic photo at the Western Wall capturing the moment the city was reunited under Israeli control. The emotional resonance was overwhelming. Rabbis blew shofars, soldiers wept, and for the first time in 2 decades, Jews could pray at their holiest site. But the jubilation masked a new reality. Israel now governed a united Jerusalem, including Arab neighborhoods that had never been part of its vision. The city's boundaries expanded overnight, swallowing up ancient villages like Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah, their residents suddenly subjects of a state they didn't recognize. The world watched as Jerusalem transformed yet again, no longer divided but far from at peace. The seeds planted under British rule had grown into a thorny tree, its roots too deep to untangle easily. The morning of June 7, 1967, dawned with a tension that seemed to crackle in the dry Jerusalem air. Israeli paratroopers, battle-weary but determined, advanced through the narrow alleyways of East Jerusalem, their progress marked by the rattle of gunfire and the occasional explosion of a Jordanian artillery shell. By afternoon, the unthinkable had happened. Israeli forces breached the Lion's Gate, pouring into the Old City for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The moment Defense Minister Moshe Dayan arrived at the Western Wall, placing a handwritten prayer between its ancient stones, the radio broadcast a message that would echo through history: "The Temple Mount is in our hands." For Jews worldwide, it was a seismic emotional release, the culmination of 2,000 years of longing. Holocaust survivors wept openly, their tattoos a stark reminder of why this victory felt like redemption. Synagogues from New York to Buenos Aires erupted in spontaneous singing of "Jerusalem of Gold," a song written just weeks earlier that now sounded like prophecy fulfilled. But Jerusalem's reunification was a mosaic of conflicting emotions. For Muslims, the sight of Israeli flags fluttering over the Dome of the Rock ignited deep anxiety. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, Islam's third holiest site, now stood under Israeli military control, a reality that contradicted centuries of Islamic custodianship. Palestinian families in Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah, neighborhoods suddenly absorbed into Israel's expanded municipal boundaries, watched as surveyors mapped their homes for potential Jewish settlement. Christian communities faced their own dilemmas. Armenian priests fretted over property deeds in the Old City, while evangelical pilgrims saw Israel's victory as a sign of biblical fulfillment. The city's spiritual gravity seemed to pull everyone in different directions, its holiness both a unifier and a wedge. Dayan's decision to hand administrative control of the Temple Mount back to Jordan's Islamic Waqf was a tactical masterstroke, an attempt to balance sovereignty with religious pragmatism. Jews could visit but not pray on the Mount. Muslims retained authority over Islam's sacred precincts. This fragile status quo, designed to prevent escalation, instead became a perpetual friction point. Within hours of the war's end, archaeologists began excavating beneath the Western Wall, uncovering Herodian-era streets that thrilled scholars but alarmed Palestinians, who saw each trowel of dirt as a threat to the Mount's stability. Meanwhile, Israel's rapid annexation of East Jerusalem, a move unrecognized internationally, transformed the city into a geopolitical powder keg. The United Nations condemned the action, Arab leaders vowed to reclaim what they called occupied Arab Jerusalem. Even Israel's closest allies hesitated to endorse its declaration of Jerusalem as the eternal, undivided capital. In the decades since, the city's reunification has remained more legal fiction than lived reality. Palestinian residents of East Jerusalem hold Israeli ID cards but often reject citizenship, clinging to the dream of a future capital. Jewish settlers move into Arab neighborhoods under heavy guard, their presence a deliberate challenge to territorial compromises. The Western Wall Plaza, once a narrow alley, now sprawls as a grand national shrine, while just beyond its security barriers, the cramped streets of the Muslim Quarter buzz with resentment. Pilgrims of all faiths still walk the Via Dolorosa and kneel at the Holy Sepulchre, but their paths are monitored by cameras and armed patrols. Jerusalem's ancient stones have borne witness to countless conquests, but perhaps none as paradoxical as this one. A unification that deepened divisions, a military victory that birthed an endless diplomatic stalemate. The city's soul remains as contested as its soil, a reminder that in Jerusalem, even peace is a battle fought on sacred ground. Walking through Jerusalem today is like stepping into a living atlas of faith and friction, where the dream of unity collides daily with the reality of division. On one side of the invisible line, West Jerusalem buzzes with Hebrew street signs, kosher cafes, and the hum of modern Israel, a metropolis of high-tech startups and bustling light rail lines. Just a few miles east, the rhythm shifts. Arabic replaces Hebrew on shop awnings, the call to prayer echoes from minarets, and the scent of cardamom coffee wafts from alleyway stalls. This isn't just a city of two cultures, it's a mosaic of parallel lives where Jewish and Arab residents often inhabit the same streets but move through separate worlds. Schools, buses, even hospitals operate in divided systems, a reality cemented by decades of political stalemate. Yet amid the segregation, unexpected threads of connection persist, like the Jewish doctor treating Palestinian patients at Hadassah Hospital, or the Arab contractors hired to restore synagogues in the Old City. The tension sharpens where sacred and political spaces overlap. Take the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, where decades-old property disputes have ignited international outcry. Palestinian families face eviction from homes they've occupied since the 1950s, while Israeli courts rule in favor of Jewish groups presenting Ottoman-era land deeds. Each court ruling sparks protests, with activists decrying settler colonialism and supporters framing it as legal restitution for Jewish properties lost in 1948. A similar drama unfolds in Silwan, where Jewish settlement expansions near the City of David archaeological site have displaced Arab residents, turning underground tunnels into battlegrounds over who controls the narrative and the land beneath the surface. Nowhere is the fragile balance more visible than on the Temple Mount, known to Muslims as Haram al-Sharif. Israeli security controls access to the site, scanning every visitor at the Maghrabi Gate, while Jordan's Islamic Waqf administers daily prayers. A stray comment, a hidden flag, even the timing of a Jewish tourist's visit can ignite clashes, like in 2021, when Ramadan protests over restrictions spiraled into an 11-day war with Gaza. Yet remarkably, for most of the year the system holds. Jewish groups ascend the wooden ramp to visit, but not pray under watchful Waqf guards, while Muslim worshippers stream through the Lion's Gate, their sandals padding across the same stones where crusaders and caliphs once tread. Jerusalem's symbolic weight in peace talks is both its curse and its paradox. Negotiators from Camp David to Oslo have circled the question like a third rail: how to divide a city that 3 billion people consider indivisible. Maps become Rorschach tests, one side seeing historic Jewish neighborhoods like Shiloh as non-negotiable, the other labeling them illegal settlements. Even the terminology is contested. United Jerusalem versus occupied East Jerusalem, each phrase a declaration of allegiance, yet for all the deadlock, the city stubbornly resists simplification. Its Armenian ceramicists sell crosses to evangelical pilgrims. Its Jewish musicians study Arabic oud melodies. Its Palestinian tour guides recount Herod's history to Israeli school groups. The very stones seem to whisper that Jerusalem's destiny was never meant to be tidy, that its power lies not in resolution, but in the unresolved tension between memory and possibility. Every sunrise here is a reminder. This isn't just a city to be won or lost, but a mirror held up to humanity's best and worst impulses, reflecting back our capacity for both division and unexpected grace. The question of Jerusalem's future has haunted diplomats for decades, a puzzle where every proposed solution seems to unravel at the edges. Take the Camp David summit in 2000, where US President Bill Clinton brought Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat face to face. Barak offered unprecedented concessions: Palestinian sovereignty over Arab neighborhoods, even shared administration of the Temple Mount surface, while Israel retained control below. But the devil was in the details. Palestinians saw the offer as a fragmented archipelago of disconnected enclaves, with Israeli checkpoints still controlling movement. Arafat's refusal wasn't just tactical. It reflected a deeper fear that accepting anything less than full sovereignty over East Jerusalem would betray generations of Palestinian aspirations. The summit collapsed, and within months, the Second Intifada erupted, its violence etching new wounds into the city's streets. The Oslo Accords of the 1990s had tried to sidestep Jerusalem entirely, deferring its status to final negotiations, a delay that only magnified its symbolic weight. Behind closed doors, though, creative ideas simmered. Some proposed a soft border model where neighborhoods would self-govern under an umbrella municipality, much like Brussels' bilingual districts. Others floated Vatican-style internationalization, with a consortium of religious and UN representatives overseeing holy sites. The most daring plans imagined two capitals overlapping in one city: Israeli ministries in West Jerusalem, Palestinian ones in East, with a shared light rail connecting both. But these blueprints ran aground on the same rocks. How do you divide a city where every hilltop holds someone's heaven? Global powers have long treated Jerusalem as a diplomatic third rail. The United Nations' original 1947 partition plan designated it as a corpus separatum, an international zone, a concept that satisfied no one. Even now, most foreign embassies avoid West Jerusalem, clustering in Tel Aviv to dodge recognizing Israeli sovereignty. Yet the city's gravitational pull is undeniable. When the US moved its embassy to Jerusalem in 2018, it triggered protests from Jakarta to Istanbul, while Guatemala and Kosovo followed suit. The European Union, meanwhile, walks a tightrope, funding Palestinian institutions in East Jerusalem while cooperating with Israel on counterterrorism. What makes Jerusalem unique isn't just its history, but its role as a litmus test for how the world navigates identity in an age of nationalism. For every leader who calls it the eternal capital, there's a refugee who remembers the key to a house now occupied by strangers. The city's agony lies in its impossibility, too sacred to share, too precious to abandon. And so the negotiations continue, not because anyone expects a solution, but because Jerusalem, in its relentless complexity, refuses to let us look away. Jerusalem's diplomatic dance is a high-stakes performance where every move echoes across the global stage. When the United States moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in May 2018, it wasn't just a logistical shift, it was a political earthquake. The Trump administration's decision fulfilled a decades-old promise by American politicians, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's undivided capital. Supporters cheered it as a long-overdue acknowledgement of historical ties. Palestinian leaders condemned it as a death blow to peace efforts. The timing was explosive, coinciding with the 70th anniversary of Israel's founding and the same week as Palestinian Nakba Day, which mourns the displacement of hundreds of thousands in 1948. Protesters in Gaza clashed with Israeli forces as the embassy opened, leaving dozens dead in a stark reminder of how symbolism here bleeds into violence. Other nations have tiptoed around Jerusalem's status with carefully worded ambiguity. Most European Union countries keep embassies in Tel Aviv, wary of prejudging final borders in future negotiations. Yet even this neutrality has cracks. In 2020, Kosovo and Serbia announced plans to open Jerusalem embassies in a U.S. brokered deal, while Honduras and Guatemala relocated theirs in a show of solidarity with Washington. China, meanwhile, plays both sides, hosting Palestinian leaders in Beijing while deepening tech partnerships with Israel, all while avoiding any embassy moves that might upset the delicate balance. The cultural battleground extends beyond embassies. UNESCO, the UN's cultural agency, has repeatedly sparked controversy with resolutions referring to Jerusalem's holy sites solely by their Arabic names, omitting Jewish and Christian connections. Critics accuse these votes of historical erasure, pointing to the Western Wall's description as Al-Burak Plaza or the Temple Mount's designation as Haram al-Sharif without parallel Jewish terminology. Supporters argue it's about correcting colonial narratives and affirming Palestinian heritage. Either way, the debates reveal a deeper truth. In Jerusalem, even heritage listings are proxy wars over legitimacy. Yet beneath the political storms, Jerusalem's cultural legacy transcends borders. Its Armenian Quarter preserves the world's oldest diaspora community, where artisans still hand-paint ceramic tiles using techniques passed down since the Crusades. The city's music scene weaves Armenian duduk melodies with Arabic maqam scales and Jewish liturgical chants, a soundscape as layered as its history. Writers from Yehuda Amichai to Mahmoud Darwish have penned verses about its alleyways, each capturing a different facet of its fractured soul. The annual Jerusalem Film Festival screens Israeli and Palestinian directors side by side, their stories unfolding in the shadow of the same ancient walls. This duality is Jerusalem's paradox, a city where every stone is claimed by someone yet belongs to everyone. Diplomats may debate its borders, but its poets know better. This isn't just a place to be divided on maps, but a living tapestry that refuses to be unraveled. The real Jerusalem exists in the space between its conflicts and its harmonies, in the way the call to prayer and church bells and shofar blasts somehow find a way to share the same air. However the embassies align or resolutions vote, that deeper truth remains. Cities like this aren't owned, only borrowed. Their true legacy written not in treaties but in the art, faith, and stubborn coexistence that outlasts every empire. Jerusalem's stones don't just hold history, they hum with it. Walk through its alleys at dusk, and you might hear the echo of a lute drifting from an Armenian tavern, or the mournful wail of a ney flute blending with Hebrew psalms from a nearby synagogue. This is a city where creativity has always thrived in the cracks between faiths, where artists and poets have turned its contradictions into something luminous. Take Yehuda Amichai, Israel's most beloved poet, whose verses wove the sacred and mundane into a single tapestry. In Jerusalem, 1967, he described the city as a port on the shore of eternity, where laundry lines strung between ancient buildings flutter like the flags of all nations that didn't win. His words capture the paradox of Jerusalem, simultaneously grounded in daily life and reaching for the divine. Across the cultural spectrum, Jerusalem has been a muse. The legendary Egyptian singer Kulthum, though never a resident, filled her concerts with odes to Al-Aqsa, her voice a force of nature binding millions of Arab listeners to the city's spiritual pull. In the 1950s, Iraqi Jewish musicians who fled to Jerusalem infused the city's soundscape with maqam scales played on santers and ouds, their melodies a bittersweet bridge between lost homelands and new beginnings. Even today, the Jerusalem Orchestra East-West performs symphonies that marry Arabic and Western classical traditions, their concerts drawing crowds from all sides of the city's divides. The visual arts tell a similar story of layered inspiration. Armenian ceramicists in the Old City have painted tiles with pomegranates and crosses for centuries, their kilns firing designs that borrow from Persian miniatures and Byzantine mosaics. In the 1920s, German Jewish artists of the Bezalel school revived biblical motifs with Art Nouveau flair, their sculptures and tapestries proclaiming a cultural renaissance. Palestinian painters like Slimane Mansour, working under occupation, turned to village scenes and olive trees as acts of quiet resistance, their canvases preserving a vanishing rural life. Festivals here are less performances than collisions of worlds. The annual Jerusalem Sacred Music Festival transforms churches and synagogues into stages where Sufi Hikka ceremonies mingle with Hasidic nigunim and Gregorian chant. During the Ramadan Nights Bazaar, the stone vaults near Damascus Gate glow with lanterns as storytellers recite 1001 nights to crowds sipping tamarind juice. Even the city's famous silent balconies, where residents hang artworks during times of tension, become a gallery of shared grief and hope, each piece a silent shout across the divide. Beneath this vibrant surface lies another layer of Jerusalem's genius, its archaeological archives where every shovel of earth reveals artistic legacies. In the 19th century, a British archaeologist uncovered the Siloam inscription, an ancient Hebrew text carved into a tunnel wall, celebrating King Hezekiah's engineering feat to bring water into the city. Crusader-era graffiti etched into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre shows medieval pilgrims left their mark alongside modern visitors, and in the shadow of the Temple Mount, a 1st-century stone weight stamped with the Hebrew word doka, meaning pure, hints at the meticulous rituals that once animated these streets. Jerusalem's art isn't just about beauty, it's a survival tactic. When poets write about its light, when musicians tune their strings to its dissonances, they're doing what generations before them have done, making something whole out of fragments, proving that even in a city of shattered dreams, creation persists. The mosaics may be cracked, but the tiles still catch the sun. Beneath Jerusalem's bustling streets lies a hidden world of tunnels, cisterns, and buried ruins, each layer whispering secrets of the city's past. One of the most astonishing discoveries is Hezekiah's Tunnel, a winding, knee-deep water channel carved through solid rock nearly 3,000 years ago. The biblical account in 2 Kings tells how King Hezekiah ordered its construction to protect Jerusalem's water supply from Assyrian invaders. Walking through its damp, narrow passage today, you can still see the chisel marks left by ancient engineers, some so precise that modern archaeologists marvel at their accuracy. In 1880, a boy playing in the tunnel stumbled upon the Siloam inscription, a Hebrew text celebrating the moment two teams of diggers, working from opposite ends, met in the middle. This wasn't just an engineering feat, it was a testament to Jerusalem's relentless will to survive. But the City of David excavations just south of the Temple Mount have stirred even more profound revelations and controversies. Here, archaeologists have uncovered stepped stone structures that may date to King David's era, along with seal impressions bearing names like Jedaliah son of Pashur, a biblical official mentioned in Jeremiah. For many Jews, these finds are tangible proof of their ancient connection to the land. For Palestinians, though, the digs feel like political tools, a way to legitimize Israeli claims over East Jerusalem. The tunneling beneath Arab neighborhoods has caused homes to crack, fueling accusations that archaeology is being weaponized. Even scholars debate interpretations. Is this really David's palace or a later Canaanite fortress? The past, it seems, is never just about facts, it's about whose story gets told. Then there's the Pool of Siloam, where Jesus is said to have healed a blind man. Rediscovered in 2004 during sewer repairs, its grand Herodian staircases and ritual baths revealed how pilgrims once purified themselves before ascending to the temple. Yet, just as these discoveries inspire awe, they ignite disputes. When archaeologists announced they'd found Nehemiah's wall, Palestinian officials dismissed it as propaganda, while ultra-Orthodox Jews protested the disturbance of ancient graves. The irony is striking. The same stones that unite people across millennia also divide them in the present. Amid the scientific rigor, myths cling to Jerusalem like ivy. Some whisper of hidden chambers beneath the Temple Mount holding the Ark of the Covenant, though no credible evidence exists. Others speculate about secret Templar tunnels or Crusader treasure, legends that blur the line between history and fantasy. Even the Jerusalem syndrome, where visitors experience religious delusions, speaks to the city's uncanny power to warp reality. Perhaps that's the paradox of Jerusalem's archaeology. It unearths hard truths, yet the city's deepest magic lies in what remains just out of reach, shimmering between fact and faith. Every shovel of dirt reveals another chapter, but the story is never finished. Jerusalem's mystique isn't just carved into its stones, it's woven into the very fabric of imagination, where history blurs into legend. Among the most enduring myths is the lost Ark of the Covenant, said to have vanished when the Babylonians destroyed Solomon's temple. Some believe it was spirited away to Ethiopia, hidden beneath a church in Axum where monks guard it to this day. Others whisper of secret tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, where the Ark rests in a chamber known only to a select few. The medieval Jewish scholar Maimonides wrote of its concealment, suggesting it would reappear only in Messianic times. These tales aren't just relics of the past, they fuel modern expeditions, like the controversial digs by pseudo-archaeologists scanning the City of David with ground-penetrating radar, hoping to stumble upon gold beneath the bedrock. Then there's the legend of the Garden of Eden's location. Some ancient Jewish and Christian traditions place it just beyond Jerusalem's gates, in the nearby Kidron Valley. Medieval maps like the Hereford Mappa Mundi depicted Jerusalem as the center of the world, with Eden hovering at its eastern edge. The Gihon Spring, Jerusalem's ancient water source, was sometimes equated with Eden's life-giving rivers, its waters said to hold healing properties. Pilgrims in the Byzantine era would fill flasks here, convinced they were carrying a piece of paradise home. Even today, mystic groups gather in Siloam's pools, performing rituals they believe reconnect them with primordial holiness. These legends aren't mere stories, they're psychological anchors. When Crusaders stormed Jerusalem in 1099, many believed they were reclaiming a city literally touched by heaven. The Templars, accused of unearthing Ark-related secrets beneath the Temple Mount, wove their own mythology, blending biblical prophecy with esoteric rites. Fast forward to the 19th century, when British explorers like Charles Warren mapped subterranean tunnels, their reports dripping with hints of hidden treasures, fueling a colonial obsession with unlocking Jerusalem's secrets. Yet for all their grandeur, these tales reveal a deeper truth. Jerusalem's power lies in its ability to be more than a city. It's a mirror for humanity's deepest yearnings, for redemption, for origins, for divine connection. The very uncertainty of these legends amplifies their hold. The Ark's absence is as potent as its presence would be, and that's the paradox. The less we can prove, the more fervently we believe. As Jerusalem strides into the future, these myths refuse to fade. They surface in peace talks where symbolic gestures like shared custody of holy sites clash with uncompromising visions of sovereignty. They echo in the debates over archaeology, where every trowel of soil is scrutinized for political meaning, and they linger in the hearts of pilgrims who still scan the horizon for glimpses of the celestial city described in Scripture. Jerusalem's past may be written in stone, but its future is etched in something far less tangible: the collective imagination of billions who see it not just as a place, but as a promise. Whether that promise leads to conflict or reconciliation may be the greatest legend of all. Peering into Jerusalem's future feels like gazing at a mosaic where every tile holds a different vision, some shimmering with hope, others shadowed by strife. One persistent idea is partition, a two capitals solution where West Jerusalem remains Israel's political heart, while East Jerusalem anchors a future Palestinian state. Maps drawn during peace talks carve the city into intricate jigsaw pieces: Jewish neighborhoods under Israeli sovereignty, Arab ones under Palestinian control, and holy sites governed by an international consortium. Yet this seemingly tidy division stumbles on gritty realities. Take neighborhoods like Abu Tor, where Jewish and Arab families live shoulder to shoulder. How do you split a street without drawing a wall through someone's living room? And what of the settlements encircling East Jerusalem, their apartment blocks looming like concrete facts on the ground? Even if leaders ink a deal, Jerusalem's organic sprawl resists neat borders, its tangled streets refusing to conform to any diplomat's red pen. An alternative vision floats the idea of shared sovereignty, a condominium where both nations claim Jerusalem as their capital without dividing it physically. Imagine parallel governments, Israeli ministries in the west, Palestinian in the east, with joint patrols in the Old City. The Temple Mount might remain under Jordanian custodianship, while a council of Christian denominations oversees the Holy Sepulchre. Switzerland's model for managing multilingual cantons offers a faint blueprint, though Jerusalem's layers of sacred trauma make Geneva's tidy compromises seem naive. Grassroots initiatives already test this concept. Combatants for Peace, a group of former Israeli soldiers and Palestinian fighters, lead joint tours through the city's conflict zones, reframing narratives in real time. At the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, Jewish and Arab teens harmonize in Hebrew and Arabic, their concerts proving that coexistence isn't a fantasy, just an exhausting daily choice. Yet demography looms as the quiet disruptor of all plans. Jerusalem's population is a ticking clock. Ultra-Orthodox Jews, with their high birth rates, now dominate Western neighborhoods, while Palestinian families expand faster in the east. By 2050, Arabs could outnumber Jews within the city's current borders, a shift that terrifies Israelis who fear losing their majority and excites Palestinians who envision electoral leverage. But raw numbers ignore nuance. Many Palestinian residents reject Israeli citizenship even as they pay municipal taxes, clinging to the dream of eventual independence. Meanwhile, young secular Jews flee soaring housing costs, drained by the city's relentless tensions. These silent migrations are redrawing Jerusalem's social map in ways no peace plan anticipates. The darkest scenario, perpetual conflict, requires no imagination. It's the status quo on steroids: more settlements, more home demolitions, more rockets fired from Gaza in response to police raids on Al-Aqsa. In this version, Jerusalem becomes a frozen wound, its holy sites bristling with cameras and sniper positions, its streets scarred by periodic riots. The security barrier, once billed as temporary, hardens into a permanent seam, its graffiti fading under layers of fresh concrete. Tourists still flock to the Western Wall and the Dome of the Rock, but they're funneled through airport-style checkpoints, their visits choreographed to avoid friction. The city staggers on, a global symbol of intractable division, its spiritual light dimmed by the weight of unhealed grievances. But Jerusalem has always defied predictions. For every force pulling it apart, there are quiet hands stitching it together. Palestinian and Israeli architects collaborate on urban projects, designing parks that bridge divided neighborhoods. Joint Israeli-Palestinian medical teams at Hadassah Hospital treat victims of attacks from both sides in the same wards. Even the archaeology wars have spawned unlikely partnerships: Muslim scholars and Jewish historians poring over Ottoman land records together, seeking truths deeper than propaganda. These efforts won't make headlines like a peace treaty, but they're rewiring the city's nervous system one connection at a time. Jerusalem's future may not be written in treaties or maps, but in the stubborn refusal of its people, all its people, to let the city's soul be fractured beyond repair. The stones have seen empires rise and fall. They'll outlast this struggle too, waiting patiently for the day when its children finally choose a different story. Jerusalem stands as a paradox carved in stone, a city where the sacred and the scarred exist side by side, where heaven and earth seem to touch yet human hands keep pulling them apart. Its hills have echoed with the prayers of prophets and the cries of conquerors, its soil absorbing the blood of martyrs and the footsteps of pilgrims for millennia. What makes Jerusalem unlike any other place isn't just its history, but the way geography, faith, and human ambition have collided here with unparalleled intensity. This is a city built on bedrock and belief, where every alleyway holds layers of meaning, every stone a silent witness to both transcendence and tragedy. The very landscape seems designed for destiny. Perched high in the Judean mountains, Jerusalem's natural defenses made it a fortress, while its crossroads location turned it into a meeting point for empires, traders, and seekers. But its true power lies in how it became a mirror for humanity's highest aspirations and deepest divisions. For Jews, it's the site of the temple's ruins and the promise of restoration. For Christians, the stage of crucifixion and resurrection. For Muslims, the gateway of the prophet's ascent. These narratives don't just overlap, they intertwine, each claiming the same stones, the same horizons, the same divine favor. The result is a city that feels both eternal and fragile, where a single spark can ignite centuries-old tensions, yet where moments of unexpected grace still flicker through the cracks. Perhaps Jerusalem's greatest lesson is that holiness and humanity are inseparable. The same stones that form the Western Wall once buttressed Herod's palaces, their grandeur built on political calculation as much as piety. The Dome of the Rock's golden dome shines as a testament to faith, but its foundations rest on the debris of empires that came before. Even the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, revered as the tomb of Christ, stands as a monument to both devotion and discord, its factions locked in an uneasy truce. This duality isn't a flaw, it's the essence of Jerusalem. A city too perfect would feel distant, untouchable. Instead, its very brokenness makes it relatable, a mirror of our own struggles to reconcile the divine with the everyday. As the sun sets over the old city, painting its walls in hues of gold and amber, it's impossible not to wonder, could Jerusalem's fractures someday become its strength? The archaeologists uncovering shared histories beneath its streets, the musicians blending Arabic makam with Hebrew psalms, the doctors treating all patients regardless of faith. These are the quiet rebels writing a different future. They understand that Jerusalem's magic lies not in domination, but in its ability to hold contradictions without collapsing. Its stones have survived Babylon and Rome, crusades and sieges. Perhaps they can also outlast our current divisions. So what do you think? Can a city so steeped in conflict ever become a symbol of unity? Share your thoughts in the comments, because Jerusalem's story isn't just written in ancient scrolls or peace treaties. It's being written by all of us every time we engage with its complexities, its pain, and its undying hope. However you envision its future, one thing remains certain. Jerusalem will endure, not as a trophy for any one people, but as a challenge and a gift to the entire world. Its light hasn't faded yet, and if history is any guide, it